Hello and welcome. Hi there. Welcome. Come on in. Come on in. Today we are talking about the power of focus, and I am so excited to have Taylor here as our guest. Now, Taylor, he's the creator of Focusmate.com, which harnesses behavioural science to eliminate procrastination and to make it easier and more rewarding to accomplish your most important work. He's also a trained executive coach and expert on behavioural change, and he's worked with clients like Wharton and Yale, and he's been featured in Forbes, GQ, CNN, and the Huffington Post. What does CQ want to interview you about? I'm curious.
I actually did some work for GQ while I was living in India.
Oh, right. Okay. And world travelled as well. Fantastic. Well, we get into a bit more on your story shortly. I just want to say I have used Focusmate for about a year now, I think, isn't it, Taylor? And I do multiple sessions every week. It's a virtual co-working platform. We'll get into kind of how it all works and everything later on in the show. But I just wanted to say, please, please, please go and check that out, because it's focusmate.com and it's a free platform. You can start using it. It has definitely made a massive difference to me, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get Taylor on here. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Doyle. I'm the founder of creativeflow.tv, and I work with creative service providers in roles like graphic and web design, photography, video, or courageous creatives community, which literally is opening its doors just about now. So you can search it and request to join now, and I'll be kind of sharing that out in the future. What I do is I help these creative service providers to confidently and profitably stand out from the crowd and to be able to make a difference doing creative work that they love, that fills their hearts with pride, but without having to sell their soul. Because I think a lot of creative people are like, oh no, I don't want to be selling it sleazy and all that. But there are ways that you can make your business work without having to do that. Okay, so as I said, today I'm here with Taylor, the founder of Focusmate.com. Now, I wanted to just talk about the fact that just to explain as well, we originally were going to do this a short while ago, and we had a few technical difficulties. So we are doing it again. But you posted in the group, your Focusmate group at the time, that you said one of the defining aspects of my career has been trying to unlock my potential. It sounds trite or perhaps corny, but it's actually been a journey fraught with shame and struggle. First in traditional jobs, where I never felt like I fit in, then as a broke freelance writer and shooter, later as a social entrepreneur, eventually as an executive coach, and now as a full-time entrepreneur. And so I just was like, we don't often see the behind the scenes of people, of how they feel and kind of what founding Focusmate. I'm just curious about, so what was actually going on at that point? You're saying it was like shame and struggle. It's like, they're very strong words. They really prompted my curiosity.
There wasn't one point. It really, it's one of those like Steve Jobs, the dots connect looking back. But it's really, as I look back, there's like trappings of this story everywhere. And I actually, as I was reflecting on it a few weeks ago, I realized that really the first time that I had an experience of accountability specifically, I was in 7th grade, and like by and by I had gotten a bit chubbier than I was, 7th grade, like hormones are in full blast, and like you're trying to be cool for the first time instead of just having fun. And so, talking about shame, like middle school, but I was just too scared to do it on my own. So I had one friend who was sort of like the friend that was, down for whatever. And I asked him if he would go to that first, the first meeting to find out about the team. And he said, sure. And I don't think I would have joined the cross country team without Dave saying yes. And just using that to help me get into this structure that could then support me to eventually lose some weight and like feel good when I showed up at high school a couple years later.
Fantastic.
And then, you know, probably the first time that it was really salient in my professional career, I was living in India and I had just left the traditional workforce and I just was totally unproductive. I really struggled to just like get basic business building tasks done during the day. And that was like 6 months, you know, this has been a multi-year journey, but those 6 months was like, oh man, like this is a big problem, to the extent that I actually like, I had to take the pressure off of myself to like be productive. And I was like, mission number one is to just like stop beating myself up so much about this, because that's like, you know, maybe more debilitating than anything. And you know, I think learning to be productive, that's just an ongoing thing. And there's you figure something out and then there's the next thing. But yeah, you know, shame, it is a strong word, but I think that we all feel it, even if we don't like let ourselves admit that that's what we're feeling.
Well, I've no doubt about it that there are many people who are going to resonate with what you're saying, Taylor. And I know when I've been doing Focusmate sessions, I've worked with lots of freelancers, and they, you know, they love it when they get to the end of a session and they're like, oh, I've done this and I've done that. And yeah, you can just see the relief of, oh, I've been putting this off, and now I've got it done. And people are always posting in the Facebook community, aren't they, on Facebook, in the Focusmate community on Facebook. So it's, yeah, I think it's easy for people to suppress these feelings and therefore not do anything about them because they're not facing up to them. So what was it that really made you face up to it then and decide to do something about that situation?
I mean, I think it was really simple, of just kind of realizing that this technique was ridiculously effective, and having a lot of evidence for that in my life. So I mentioned the, you know, middle school weight loss situation, but, you know, I ran a marathon when I was in college. I was studying abroad in France, and like, you know, suddenly there was no gym, there's nowhere to go to. I had no routines established. And I just approached this one guy that I really didn't know that was in my study abroad program. And I said, hey, do you want to train for a marathon together? And he said yes. And like the rest is history, you know? So I guess it started out more with fitness stuff, where I just knew that like, if I had to count on only myself, you know, it's going to be mostly Netflix and Chinese takeout. But if I can get like a good buddy, signed up, then I'm like, you know, I'm ready to go. And then a few years ago, I was visiting a friend, and we were in his home office, and I noticed that he had this this window open, a Skype window open on his screen, and there was nobody in it. And that was like a little bit of an odd thing to see. Somebody just has like a video call going with nobody there. So I just asked him, and he said, oh, like my business partner and I, we just get on Skype at 9 a.m. every day, and we leave it open until 5 o'clock. So like he might be at a lunch meeting, or, you know, he might be going for a walk or whatever. And this was actually at the time when I was really struggling with my own productivity. And my initial reaction was like terror. I was like, gosh, that sounds like so much accountability. I am like, you know, if I had that much of a spotlight on me, I would, you know, it would be brutal because I'm so unproductive. But I don't, you know, I got older, wiser or something, and I kind of just lost this notion that like you should do it on your own, or that there's some like glory in like doing it a certain way. And I just got to the point where I was like, all I care about is getting stuff done. Like I just want to be successful in my life. I want to achieve these goals. So who cares? And so I had a friend who's an entrepreneur, really impressive guy, who had an investor pitch coming up a couple weeks away. And he reached out to just basically say like, hey man, you're an executive coach. maybe you have some ideas to help me out. And I knew that he didn't need coaching. I didn't really know what he needed, but I just said, let's just get on Skype tomorrow and I'll just sit with you while you work and I'll do my work. And that was like, it was magic. So that was the seed. And since we've built this product to make that experience possible. And I won't nerd out unless you ask me to on all the behavioral science and all the triggers baked into it. But
I'd love to know more about that, definitely. But first, I just want to highlight the point that you made there, just in case it's escaped people's attention, of feeling like you have to do it on your own. And I just think that's so powerful to realize that you don't have to do it on your own. And I had a breakthrough, it was actually, I think it was a couple of years ago now. And I'm an actor as well as a business coach. And there's a podcast I listen to called Inside Acting, run by these lovely guys called AJ and Trevor. They're over in LA. Two cool dudes as they kind of, they're just really nice guys. But they were talking about a book they've been reading called Better Than Before by Gretchen Rubin. Have you come across that one?
I know Gretchen Rubin. I've read some of her stuff. I haven't read that one yet.
It's brilliant. It literally breaks down everything around habits. And you've probably taken this from other sources. But it just really, because she has this online test as well that people can take to find out, what kind of habit person are they? And I found out I'm an obliger, which means that accountability works really, really well for me. And I read this book and I just went, I kind of knew that about myself, but I think sometimes when you see it in black and white, it hits home, doesn't it, in another way? And I just decided, right, anything that's important to me, I'm going to have accountability. And I already had some accountability, but that was what made me go and get a personal trainer. And I've been working with a personal trainer ever since. In fact, I've just switched to a new one. And very tough routine yesterday for my first session, but brilliant. And I'm going to have a personal trainer forever. That's my attitude. It's not just a kind of, I'm going to do that. Like I'm getting married next year. I'm going to do this until I get married and I'm nice and fit. And, then I'm going to become a slob again. No, it's a way of life. I got accountability in my business. I have accountability in the moment with the Focusmates. And it's that thing of not having to do it all on your own. So I'd love you to nerd out. What is it about? In fact, I tell you what, let's just explain to people how Focusmate works first, and then it'll probably make more sense if you could nerd out a bit and explain why does it work so well.
Yeah, sure. So the core of the Focusmate experience is a Focusmate session, and that is a structured 50-minute video interaction where you and another user act as accountability partners for each other, and you sit side by side over video while you each do your work.
I have a picture like this. So that's Taylor and somebody there doing that.
Yeah, so if you join Focusmate, what you'll find is a calendar, and you'll see times that other people have requested sessions that are looking for partners. So you can match with them. You can request any time, and you'll get automatically matched up with somebody to do a Focusmate session.
There you go.
As far as why it works, there's like a laundry list, so I'll focus on a couple of the biggest ones. We throw around the term accountability, but in like a academic sense, like what does accountability really mean? It means there's consequences for not doing something. So on Focusmate, if you are late, if you don't show up, if you don't follow the community protocols that we've set out for how to be a good partner, you can get reported. Eventually, you can actually get banned from the platform. And, we don't do that to be negative, but we do it because if you follow the format, it's really effective. If you don't, it's really costly for you, but also for your partner. And people respond incredibly well to accountability, i.e. consequences. There's one study that in particular, and I can't think of the authors, but showed that having having just the prospect of negative consequences improved performance by 200 to 300%.
Wow.
So like staggering. Yeah. And then one other that I'll mention is, when you start a Focusmate session, you actually have to share with your partner what you're going to do, and then you have to write it down in the chat interface. And there's also research that shows that compared to thinking of a goal in your head, compared to writing it down, compared to sharing it with somebody, each of those things dramatically increases productivity. And the best you can do is write it down and share it with somebody. And that's certainly what we found as well. But I think just to kind of underscore, I've been doing a lot of research into just like social triggers in general. Like there's different ways that we respond to other people and that drives behavior. And I think that we think that we're rational creatures, and and we're just completely not. We're completely irrational, and we're profoundly social. And on a kind of like tangential but really cool example that a pretty new piece of research, babies that are born underweight, that are just held by their mothers skin to skin for the first couple days, they survive like dramatically more often. And there's tons of studies like this that show like there's nothing medical or scientific or whatever. It's just, we're just profoundly social. We respond to other people. So we're just, instead of sort of pushing back and saying like, I'm rational, the idea is just like, let's just embrace the fact that we're not rational, we're social, and we can use that to our advantage.
I've got a quick question for you on that. So some people might interpret social as being extroverted. So what's your view on, and I'm curious, like, because obviously some of the people, because you're doing Focusmate sessions yourself, and I'm curious as to what's your thoughts on, do you feel that more extroverted people are drawn to this, or more introverted people? Do you think it's balanced? Does that feature in it at all?
That is such a good question. I'm an introvert.
I'm an extrovert.
Yeah. I've never seen any research to suggest that these factors, that it matters for introversion versus extroversion. I mean, this is just like a profoundly human thing. Yeah. But there's actually, as an introvert, there's something really nice about the way Focusmate works, because there's it's not you're right. It's not social in the sense of conversation. It's not a networking thing. Yeah. It's the opposite of that. Yeah. And so social just means like interpersonal, human. And the structure, it's very structured. So when you start, okay, we're going to tell each other what we're going to do. I'm going to keep my partner updated through the course of the session. And at the end, we're going to check in with each other and see how it went. And actually, as an introvert, I find that structure really comforting, and like it kind of takes the pressure off. And, even if you're like on the extreme end of like, social anxiety, I think actually the structure of Focusmate can be really empowering, because all you have to do is show up and say your thing and get to work.
So there's some people who, when I've talked about this too, because I tell everybody about this, I'm always going on about it. In fact, just last week, one of my accountability partners in business was saying, oh, I need to get such and such done, and I've moved these things around to give myself this time on Friday morning. And so I immediately went back and said, I'm on Focusmate all morning. I actually I've never had this before. I had a run of 4 sessions with one person. It was awesome. And so I said to the person, oh, would you mind if this person came in? Because there was nobody to match with her. So she came and had her first Focusmate session and joined in with us. And it was brilliant. Even though she only had about an hour and a half with us, it got her into the flow of it. And then she was able to finish the tasks that she needed. But a lot of the time when I tell people about it, they go, oh my God, the thought of being on camera, whilst I'm working, that it's kind of turns them off. So what would you say to people who feel like that?
Oh, that's a good one. I guess I would just ask yourself what you're worried about. And, you know, if there really is something there, something that you're really concerned about, you can always reach out and share that with me. But I think, you know, what you find is like, maybe it's similar to that terror that I had, where it's like, oh my God, that's just a lot of accountability. And then what happens,
that's interesting,
like across the board with our users that say that they feel that way, as soon as you start that session, you're like, oh, I get it. You know. Yeah. So I think I would just push you to jump, and you'll find that there's a safe landing.
And that's really interesting what you've said, because it hadn't occurred to me that, oh, they're saying that, but actually maybe it is the accountability that they're scared of. Because I think when we're all faced with the opportunity to achieve something, then, you know, that kind of gets rid of our excuses. Then often the only thing left is that fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of rejection. And so maybe that's what's actually being triggered, rather than I don't want to be on camera. And just in case people are wondering, well, how do you work with somebody if you're on camera and it's like a split screen thing like this? Just from a practical point of view, what you do is you just move that into a separate window and have it over in the corner of your screen. Or maybe you're lucky and you have two screens, so you can have them on one person, have the people, you know, your Focusmate session on one screen and the work you're doing on another.
Some people also log on their phone.
Yes, that's another way of doing it. Yeah, personally, I prefer to have it on the computer, because what I like to do is, yes, at the beginning we say, okay, I'm working on such and such, but quite often the kind of work I'm doing on Focusmates is often bitty things. Not always. Sometimes I do something and it takes me the whole session, but a lot of the time I'm like going boom, 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 and I love that feeling of tippity type. There's the task one, go and do it. There's my next task, go and do it. There's my next task, go and do it. And I can scroll up at the end of the session and go, oh my God, look at all the things I've done.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the dopamine hit that you get from Instagram and Facebook and these addictive technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the truth is, like, the dopamine system wasn't designed for little stuff like that. That's why it's addictive and not just habitual or some healthier word. But yeah, there is, when we talk about Focusmate being a rewarding way to be productive, you actually do have that experience of dopamine every time you update. The one thing I wanted to add about kind of the fear and sort of having nothing left except just confronting the fear of failure, or like, I have to write this blog post. Am I just a terrible writer and everyone's going to hate it? I have found, and I've heard other users say, that consistently using Focusmate has changed how I relate to myself, where I now actually consider myself someone who's reliable to like do important stuff, to ship it.
Yes.
And one of our users, Nikki, actually shared with me that, you know, she takes more risks in her business now because it has changed her relationship to herself. As like, I'm someone who ships things. I'm someone who takes those risks. So, you know, that's how behavioral change happens, is you exercise a muscle and then you suddenly just are that new person.
It's like doing a morning routine, isn't it? That you have those things you go through, like exercise, meditation, journaling, whatever it is that you do. And so before you even get to your desk, you've already achieved a certain amount of things. And you're right, it's rewiring your brain, but it's also rewiring your identity. And at the end of the day, our identity is what is going to dictate all our behavior, really, isn't it? Or
yeah, just neural networks. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's funny, now that you say it, I would say that probably has had a factor in me growing in that way as well. You know, as somebody who is both extroverted and a bit head in the clouds, then, you know, for many years, that caused me to kind of go, oh, shiny new object, and to have those kinds of patterns going on. And so learning about that through the personality profiling that I do with my clients, and learning, oh, right, so these are the typical mistakes of somebody of my profile. So I need to focus on, building structure into the way that I work, so that, I'm not hit with the extremes of my strengths, which are sometimes called your weaknesses. And I can, make everything work better for me. And definitely for me, Focusmate is one of those structures. And it does, and one thing I would say to people, when you sign up, please commit. I had a no-show today, and it does kind of throw you out. And I was just finishing off my lunch, and I kind of, started the session and they weren't there. And so my lunch dragged on probably about 15 minutes more than it should have done. I mean, I was still entitled to that time, if you know what I mean, but I could have really been getting on with some other things and had a shorter lunchtime today. I think it's important that when we having that commitment is there, because you are impacting on somebody else. And so if you're a no-show, they are affected. Now, for somebody like myself, that matters. That's probably why accountability works so well with somebody like me. But it's also about, if you're struggling, then, you can take your time to figure out what you're going to do. And I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Taylor, and ask you for, one or two quick productivity or focus tips for people, as well as using your platform, of course. And I think for me, it's very much about getting clear on what you're doing. So I'm happy to spend, an hour or a whole session if I need to, organizing my week, and then, doing that in a mini version every day. Because when you have that clarity and really get clear on your priorities, then, I don't mind taking, a Focusmate session to do that, because it has such an impact on the rest of your week or the rest of your day. I think it's really worth it. And if you don't have enough clarity on your business to be able to do that, then that's when you need to be working with somebody like me, or with somebody who is going to help you to get the clarity that you need on what is it that you need to focus on in your business. And actually what you might want to do is have a look at some of the other live streams I've been doing this week. I have a free quiz called Which Creative Entrepreneur Are You quiz, and it helps you to know what are the steps that you need to be taking, looking at where you are in your business right now. It's free for you to take, and during this month I'm actually doing a live video series on each of the steps and each of the mindset shifts that you need to be making at each level, each stage, before you can move on to the next one. And I think that can help to give people the clarity and focus that they need, so that they can really maximize a tool like Focusmate. Because if you go on a Focusmate and you're like, oh, I don't know what to do, then you need to figure that out. But I guess what I'm saying is you can use the Focusmate sessions to help you figure that out as well. So that would be my tip. What about you, Taylor? What would you say?
Oh gosh, I'll give you two. So kind of keeping with the theme, I think that willpower is kind of BS. In so far as I think we glamorize it, and if there's any available method other than willpower, you should use it. And so, I think one of the most important productivity techniques that I do now is I'm obsessive about my calendar, where anything that I would have to remember, I make sure is in my calendar. Going as far as if I have a meeting, I schedule travel time, and I don't extend the meeting. I actually book a separate appointment that's called travel time, because I don't want to try to remember that actually that's not when the meeting starts. Yeah. That's when you need to travel. And then I will add buffer time after things, because in reality, you don't exactly know when something's going to end. So I just, when people see my calendar, they're like, oh my God, what is all this stuff? But it's really just, I put all that stuff in there so that I don't have to think, so that I can actually relax and know that hey, my calendar is going to tell me when I have to hit the road.
I can't get over it when I do sometimes meet people, sometimes actors, but sometimes business people too. and they don't seem to write everything down, and they think they're going to remember it all. And I'm like, how can you possibly function like that? And because, like, you know, if you're running a business, then there's a lot of things to do. And it's not always appointments. You know, sometimes we have to book those appointments with ourselves to do the things that we need to work on for our business. And I think what you said about the buffer time as well, that's perfect. What I always do is I set the meeting for when I need to leave, but I'll put the time of the meeting in the appointment description, you know, in the heading of it. So then I know, but then what that means is that my reminder alarms for that meeting are then going off. So I get to leave on time. So yeah, so there's different ways of doing things, and color coding helps as well. I find.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, like, don't keep it in your brain. Don't rely on willpower. There's another way, so use it. And the second tip I want to give is it's really a mindset tip about productivity, which I like to say that productivity requires you to move the giant rocks, with, you know, of all the pebbles and stones and rocks and sand that you are things that you could do. Yeah. Productivity is really choosing the giant rocks, moving the giant rocks. And sometimes those really take the same amount of time and effort as a smaller rock. And in order to do that, you have to let a lot of little fires burn. Which is my way of saying, like, there's a whole bunch of things that you're not going to do, and it's not going to feel good. And so this idea of, like, letting little fires burn is just a reminder that it's not going to feel good. It's going to kind of suck, actually, to move those giant boulders, because there's all this other stuff that you're not going to get to, and embrace that.
Absolutely. And I actually think this is one of the other benefits from regularly using Focusmate, is that it helps you to see how long does that actually take to do something. You know, in your head, you think, oh, it's only take me 5 minutes. And then next thing you go, oh my God, I'm 20 minutes into my Focusmate session. I've only done that one thing. So I think it helps for us to become more realistic about how long things actually take. And I know certainly for us creative types, we tend to be over optimistic about how much we can do and underestimate the time it takes to actually do things.
I totally agree. And it's valuable not just from a planning standpoint, but also because as you start to learn how long things take, then you get to, like, be gentler with yourself and be like, that's just how long it takes. And so instead of, like, getting to the end of the day and sort of having this sort of, like, intangible feeling that's like, oh, you just feel disappointed and you feel bad and like you're not a good person, you're not a productive person. But, like, the more you develop that intuition about how long things take, you're just like, that's just how it is. And you know what? I did it.
Yes. Yeah. I remember actually my fiance is a complete opposite me in strengths. So he's very analytical and detailed, and he also has a very good sense of timing. And when we first met, and I'd be like, oh, so what are you up to? Whatever. And he'd say, I'm going to do such and such. And I'd be like, is that all? But he would get it done. Anything he said he was going to get done, he would get done. Whereas I would be going, oh, I've got all these wonderful ideas. And it's like, yeah, no, it really helps to get clear on how long it takes to do things, and not to expect too much. So it's, and that's not from the point of view, I think it's great to dream big, but in a way you kind of need to do little. That's probably not the right phrase, but I think you know what I mean. That it's, have those big dreams, but just get really focused on, well, okay, so what are the few things I need to do on my way to this big dream, and just get those done first. You know, it's that so much of the time I'm coming across people who are attempting to do too many different things all at once, and then they're all crawling along rather than, okay, let's just get focused and get this one moving, get some momentum. Okay, now I can move on to the next thing. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. Fantastic. So where is Focusmate going next? What's coming up for it?
We have a chock full product roadmap, so we're just going to be working our butts off to constantly make it better. In fact, tonight we are releasing a profiles feature, so you can claim your very own Focusmate URL, and you can share what you're working on, tell us a little more about yourself, maybe what you like to listen to be productive. So we're really excited about that, in part because Focusmate it's a community, it's human beings. So this is a nice step forward to bring that community onto our website.
Fantastic. Well, I think that sounds amazing. So look, I think if everybody can go to focusmate.com, sign up, get an account, and start using it. It's everybody that I know that I've recommended they start using it who has gone, oh my God, this is amazing. It's transformative. I'm getting so much done. So it really is worth it, even if it feels, excuse me, even if it feels a little bit uncomfortable at first. Don't worry about it. And Taylor very generously offers to do your first session with him as well. Or if you want to do one with me, that's no problem. I'm happy to do that as well and guide you through it. So fantastic. Excuse me. Okay, well, Taylor, that has been very interesting and very informative, and I look forward to seeing loads more people coming on Focusmate and recognizing names. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I'm sure there are many people that can relate to how you felt and who can take this tool and use it to make the same transformation that you have as well.
Thanks so much for having me, Una. You are delightful, and it has been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, then. Bye.